Olivier, maybe we'll start with you because it was your film first. So it's your film is full of absurd objects, and these absurd objects, I think, are amongst the things, and we could observe that when we watch the film, that create laughs and break the reality of this film. Where do these objects come from, and how do you arrange them?
Well, it's at the writing stage a lot, obviously, and in the case of this film, there's lots of medieval motif, like because all the songs that he sings involving nightingale, knives, there are songs that Michel, the storyteller, he heard in the Quebec country that came from the Middle Ages. So that was, but it makes the fact that I choose to use them in a certain frame makes them absurd in a way, even if for me it's still connected to somehow to a certain reality.
But is it in a way you're you're creating somehow an atmosphere of alienation and distance that you must consciously? I mean, you're working to some effect, I think, with them. So what do you have in mind when you do that?
I'm not sure that I always know what that I'm trying to, like. I don't try to have a punchline or to create an effect. So I mean, like, I think we hear it in the crowd that any people react differently to humor. For me, it was really strange because I was sitting over there and there was I didn't. There were sometimes laugh around where I was. Sometimes it didn't, but at the other place it were. So I cannot plan obviously these things. It depends.
Was the reaction very different here now that you're saying the first time that you're showing this film to like or like one of the first times that your films are being shown in a different cultural context and I think
yeah, I was really nervous, so I'm not sure, but like. I'm less nervous like when I show them locally. Like here, I was afraid a bit. Some things might be lost in translation, but it's part of the pleasure and the thrill, I guess.
Serge, in your film, one might say there's a comical on various levels. There's one, of course, a comical that is like on a micro level. There's situations, mimics, and gestures people do, and then there's this big level. You have this you could say maybe the social configuration. You have this over PC family of Madame Hyde. You have this over eager manager type of the school director. Do you need the comical to paint your picture of society as you see it, as you imagine it?
I don't know. I have tried to do things without any comical effects, for example, like in La France, where you won't find any gags. In the last two movies, there are some comical moments, but I don't have any theoretical statement to do to say about them. What can I say? Usually, social movies, at least in France, but I think it's the same in Germany and everywhere in the world, are very realistic movies, and usually the people that you want to portray, let's say it will be Arabs living in the suburbs of Paris, they will be like victims in terms of the story. For example, a young guy is an Arab guy, he wants to rent a flat in Paris, and nobody will let him rent a flat because of the color of his skin. And I think those kind of stories are not so exciting because you always know from the start what will happen, and you confine the characters to those victim status. I think it's better when everything can happen, because fiction is like a perfect way to show miracles. As a spectator, I like to watch, like, I don't know, Douglas Sirk movies, where the things that happen won't happen in life, because they are just impossible. But that's why you are moved, that's why you are surprised, that's why you've got the feeling that you are experiencing something that is new, I don't know. And to give just one example, in my movie, there is one pupil called Malik, which is a bad pupil, and also is crippled, but then he becomes a very good pupil in a certain sense, even a passionate one. And in the end, we see that in front of the new audience which doesn't understand him, and the new teacher who doesn't understand him neither. Still, he's got this flame of the knowledge now that was transmitted from Mrs. Jekyll to him. And even if he's alone, even if nobody is understanding him, he has this deep passion for knowledge. So even somebody like him is not condemned to be a victim. He can have the desire or the dream to become a scientist, even it's very hard to do it in real life, even if I don't think that there are many scientists coming from the suburbs of Paris and no Fields Medal. I don't think so. But that's what I wanted to do just to keep on this example in my story, just to give this kind of possibility.
So would you say that that humor, and I would ask the question to both of you, is a way to liberate storytelling, to make storytelling freer, to liberate yourself from conventions?
It's also a very simple pleasure. You know, it's just a pleasure. When you watch a movie, you can have the pleasure of, I don't know, of being excited, sexually aroused, of being moved, to cry, to laugh. And I don't know, it's just like you watch a musical, for example. You have everything, songs, dance, acting. I hope, perhaps it's wrong, I'm perhaps the worst person to know about it, but I would like to do very Hollywoodian classical movies, in a certain sense. I don't try to do experimental stuff with humor. If you look, let's be simple. At the great Hollywoodian film directors from the 50s, let's take John Ford, but I could take Leo McCarey, I could take Howard Hawks, I could take any one of them. Let's take just John Ford. If you look at Donovan's Reef, it begins like a big comedy, very basic comedy with paf, paf, paf. And in the end, it's very moving. And it could be the same for the Sea Eagles. In the beginning, it's very plastic gags. And then John Wayne has an accident, and he becomes completely broken. Only his finger this finger can move. So this way of trying to get from comical moments to sad moments and to have this change of registers, change of tones, for me there is nothing experimental in it. It just belongs to the classical Hollywoodian tradition that has been lost for certain reasons, but that was there for many, many years.
And to pick up on to pick up on what he said, I think he's right, and I think humor sometimes in John Ford or in Capra. I remember I've read somewhere that it's an acceleration of things, like he was directing actors without the pauses that we see so much in realistic, actors taking long pauses before answering to make it more effect or dramatic. And in this period, you could feel a lot without even these artifices. Artificial, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there is a very good anecdote about what Olivier just said. You know that Erich von Stroheim, he was a great film director, but he was a very big failure, commercially speaking, and he was a kind of outcast in Hollywood. Then he began as a career as an actor, like a prostitute actor in a certain sense. And he played in many movies, and for example, in Sunset Boulevard by Billy Wilder. And he had this strange habit to put long silences, between each of his line of dialogue. And nobody in Hollywood dared to ask him, please, could you shut a little the silence between the dialogues? But Billy Wilder had the courage to ask him, Master, can I ask you just one thing? Why is there so many time between each of your dialogue line? And Stroheim answered, because I want to be more on the screen. It's very simple.
Eva, how do you use the comical in your in your work? Is the comical a special way of working, of acting, and does it have a certain and do you interact differently? Like, do you have a different thing in mind than when in other registers, let's say, of playing and of arousing effects from the audience?
It's a question for Olivier, clearly.
All right. I thought
it felt like a question for actors, so I think you two should answer. Serge is also an actor.
No. I'm only an actor for Q&A. I only do Q&A acting.
So, well, this question addresses me not only as an actress but also as someone who writes and creates my own theater plays. And so in my theater plays, I realized that I always want to create tragedies, actually, and they become always comedies. And then once I wanted to do a remake on stage about the party with Peter Sellers, yeah, and I thought this could be a play about racism and serious stuff. So I wanted to take away the comedy part of it, just that it gets really serious and hard. And then I think it became my best comedy because it dealt with this sadness. So it's always about sadness. Comedy is always created out of sadness, out of melancholy. So.
And to pick up on Hollywood said, what she said is really kind of Auxian, like Ox was saying, direct the dramatic scene like they're a comedy and vice versa. I felt I don't know.
Yeah, is the in how far would you in how far did you feel like could you relate to the funny and to the comicity in these two films, Eva?
I can relate very much to the absurd. So this in the first movie, when people talking in a very serious way about absurd things, this is I feel very familiar to this, and also this declination of people talking about love, and then also using the these cliches of or stereotypes. For example, for instance, the detective there, that she is really a stereotype. She uses this rough language and so this kind of stereotypes.
She's based on a real character.
Okay. And and then but so she's not in first she's not necessarily a person you sympathize with, and then but you get more in. Even with this character, you get sucked into this story and you follow her. And I find this interesting. And I liked it very much. This, but this is now, I don't know if it's about what I liked or not. But this mixture of, or these different levels of, there's this TV series talk, but mixed with fairy tale talk or subjects, or that these very basic things that happen in everyday life. You bring something precious to a bank, but this is the bank of eternal fog, or so. This is. So where you just have to watch, and you get glimpses. Yeah, this is something from everyday life, and then it's something from every fairy tale we know. So this mixture is very interesting to me. And yeah.
So it's one thing is about recognition. Ekkehard, would you say that the comic is also a way to make some things understood and to make noted?
In these films, I don't know. I have to say that concerning your film, I was, I guess, in the part where the people didn't laugh. I didn't laugh, and I think it's a very interesting film, but I don't think it's a comedy. And for me, comedy always depends on surprises, and if you surprise needs something like expectations. And if a film doesn't give you clear expectations of what will happen next, and your film doesn't, I don't have the feeling of surprise, and the lack of surprise that really hinders me from laughing and feeling like in a comedy. It has very different strengths, but I think your film is a film that plays very much to its own rules. And if there are no rules you feel that are given from the external world, it moves in wondrous ways. But it's not comedy for me. I don't know if you feel the same.
I somewhat agree. Is sometimes the pressure to label things, but I don't try to push buttons, like to say I wish they laugh over here or things like that. And So, and sometimes, you know, I'm more aiming. I'm not aiming at comedy or necessarily or to pick up genres. It's a feel that I sort of enjoy. Like in comedies, for example, the way that bodies are filmed. Like in Serge film, I thought it was really well handled with the camera. So it's not necessarily like. Gags, but just the way they handle themselves within the frame can create something.
But I would like to add something because I think so. He gives us the coordinates of his world. As I watched this film now the second time, I realized also that something I didn't get in the first time, for instance, that this nobody that comes already, this talk about nobody is also mentioned before already. So he gives the coordinates, and therefore I was surprised in many times that then something is already lanced, or he gives us already like ways into the movie, and then he picks it up later again. For instance, and there's also something very inventive in it, like the actor who stinks, which we can't experience here. We just have to trust that he really stinks, and then this talk about someone who is stinking, he's even not dirty or something, but we just have to trust he's really a stinky person, and to me this is very
it's
funny.
something that I built through words, but to come back to what you said, it's maybe that I tried to build things with a rhythm internally, and like the editing in Serge film, which I felt was really marvelous, and sometimes you got to cut, and the image automatically it creates a really strong effect, which in my case it's more I felt within the scenes. It was interesting for me as far as editing to see both in a context where we were thinking about humor and stuff like that. Because I thought they were edited in very different ways in that manner.
How do you? I mean, the classical. You're referring to the classical Hollywood films, Serge, and I think one of the ways these films usually work is that they create a very clear expectation. What was mentioned from one scene to another. It's also a question of montage. Do you try to how do you deal with it? Do you try to fulfill these expectations, or do you try to subvert these expectations? Is there a conscious strategy when you assemble this film or your films?
I want to fulfill everybody's desire.
Do you need to do you need to break expectations to fulfill desires?
I like very much Great Expectations by Dickens. It's perhaps his best novel. But this is another story. Perhaps the only thing that I can answer, it's not a direct answer, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for my dreadful English accent. So
your English is very good.
No, but let's take one example. So in my movie, I think that the comical parts come a lot from Romain Duris, who plays the head of the school. But in the beginning, all the gags come from, it's a little pretentious to say, but a political background, to put it clearly. In France, we have this separation between technical classes, general classes, okay? And the general classes can do things like TPE, special pedagogical, the technical classes cannot do this. So this is a kind of discrimination, okay? And one another example. Now in France, a lot of head of the schools, they don't come from school. They were not teachers. They come from a managerial background. So, just these two examples. So I took this from real life, and I think those two things are very bad. But then, instead of saying, this is very bad, you should not discriminate technical students, or you should not treat school like a managerial industry, I try to do things with these two things that could be funny. So it begins like a political statement, and it ends like a gag.
Is it Is there we exchanged a few one or two emails before, and Ekkehard, you mentioned that there's always an ambivalence, of course, of laughing, and this is something that you I think becomes visible in this film, that there is always the risk that people do not laugh. Maybe how you should say, in a productive manner, that they understand this thing, but they laugh about. Ekkehard, do you think that there's a fundamental difference between two different registers of laughing and humor?
There's certainly more than two registers, but of course I think what's always very important is who you laugh with and who you laugh against. You also can laugh against, and I mean, comedy usually laughs against authority. The interesting thing about this film is, of course, that the authority, the teacher, is really the person you side with, the female teacher at least. That's an interesting twist on laughing against authority. It does, of course, things with that. On the other hand, I would always defend silliness as well. Silliness is really, per se, I think, anti-authoritative, and making the teacher or the head teacher the silly person is, of course, an anti-authoritarian gesture per se, as silliness as a technique.
I should just add just one very factual thing, that,
go ahead.
For example, one of the comical themes of my movie, I was not there during the screening, so I don't know if anybody laughed or not, but there was a kind of TPA scenes where two Arab girls, one Arab, one black, they do something about the prostitutions, and this is taken from real life. I have not written everything. It's just a teacher from the Paris suburbs that told me, it was so bad, you should use it. But I don't try to find funny, line or punchlines or strange things. It's just taken from real life. It's documentary.
There's a question at this point. Maybe we'll just chip in there. Eugenio. Oh, there's I'm sorry. You have to take it yourself.
Well, come back.
Yes.
It doesn't work.
You have to switch it on.
I have to do everything here.
Yeah, you have to do everything.
I have a question for Serge. Bozon. So it was a question about France again. I have the impression that for cinema school, it's an object of desire. Not especially French cinema, but in France, it's a special object. Really, really like school, even though it's not really a sexy place. It's white and blue, and it's not a very beautiful architecture, and people. Well, I don't know. It's a question that I ask myself, because at some point I dropped a film critic career and I decided to go teach in school. So I was wondering why you went to a school.
So that's true. In a lot of French movies, you have high school scenes, you have teachers, you have things, but usually the school is just the set where the story takes place, but the story is much more interested about affective relations between the pupils, or the students, or the teachers. In my movie, it's not the case. It's really a movie about teaching. So I told myself, if you do a movie about teaching, and not, I don't know, like swimming pool, or ping pong, or lap dancing, you should have teaching scenes, for real. Self-contained scenes. You start from scratch, somebody asks a question, and you will end the scene when the question will be answered. But in fact, this is very rare.
I wanted to maybe we could to go on a moment about the ambivalence of laughter that we talked about before. And Eva, I think it's a good way to make reference to a school film that you yourself acted in. It's called in German Der Wald vor lauter Bäumen, the first film of Maren Ade, and you. And it's also a film about a school which has, and it has a school teacher. You play a school teacher who is just like painfully helpless in a way, or painfully behaving painfully strangely. Do you? There's a fine line to walk there between like laughing about her and feeling with her. How did you deal with that in a context like this?
Well, much of those feelings are created later in the editing. So while shooting, we laughed a lot. But because we knew that we go there where it hurts. But for instance, especially the school scenes. So there was also a lot of teaching in this, these scenes were also the only scenes the director we shot them again. So she in the beginning she wrote those scenes, also what the students would say and like this whole interaction. And then she realized when we did this, when we shot the films there at the school, that it gets, I don't know the word in English, that it becomes kind of a pauker film. So like these kind of high school films where students they have these clever comments and so. And because she realized that the students, they know so many of those high school movies that they don't be there, they are not themselves, they started to act immediately a character. And she wanted to get rid of this, and then so I had to prepare for a lesson, and then there were only 3 degrees where you are interested, you are half interested, this has to stop. And these were the only things the students had to react on. And so why I'm telling this is this was the most not funny part of the whole thing, because afterwards I had also always the temptation that I would go to the students in the breaks and say, hey, I'm also a cool person, and I'm not this is just a character. But I had to stay away from them because I didn't want to break their for them the image. And so it was in the end I really hated them all. So I really hated them. So, yeah. But this was not the answer of your question, no.
No.
Okay.
But would you say would you say there was a moment when you had to protect your like, did you have to protect your character from laughter in this film?
No, because the audience was always so mixed. It was especially mixed between female and male audience. So female audience was much more, they felt more with it, or maybe they were more honest to themselves that they all had been in the same situations, because I don't think that this person reacts inadequate to any situation. It's just she's out of her system. She's a new teacher in a new environment, and she doesn't have her her frame of reference. Yeah, she's lost in, there's no frame of references, so she can't read the unwritten rules of society of when is someone your friend, when is it too much, when can I approach again, and and I think therefore the movie is so funny, because we are always, when we watch this, we are also very scared, because we also know this situation, so we laugh we are scared because I was in this situation too. So, and I think also men are in this situation, but more.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the defining features, I think, of humor is that it's something where you can easily understand if a film or something works or doesn't work. I mean, the question of something working or doesn't work, not working, is especially visible in something like humor. So it is, and that was one of the titles that we had. It's always fragile. Now. How do you deal with this? How do you deal in general with the fragility of your work? And do you have a special relationship to that when it comes to humor? Olivier, maybe I'm going to ask to you first of all. So how do you think about effects of your work, and how do you and do you think about it in a special way when you think about humor?
I'm not thinking about, at least I'm not thinking about the public when I'm making. I'm more interested in the energy that is provided by the actors. So that's
So do you laugh yourself when you create?
Do I love
Do you laugh about what you're creating?
Well, there's a scene where there's lots of music. It was because I was laughing to the scene where the detective Affigan pretends she's black, and she's trying, and I couldn't help, so I put music over it because we hear me like, and so, but yeah, so the in these cases I laugh, and because I love the actors, the actress, and in this particular movie I didn't pay anyone. That's my style. So so
it's a special joke.
Yeah, exactly. So I really enjoy working with them, and I try to give them a lot to work with and to feel, because actors you need to guide them, to give them direction, but I think the good ones at least they know when they're off or when they're but actors, from what I know, they always want another take, but sometimes you gotta say that's enough, and I don't tend to shoot too many takes except for the real long ones, but sometimes it's something that we either we laugh, or at one point we either know it's we're on to something, from what because I'm trying to create something within the shots, sometimes. Same thing with the end in front. It's a gimmick, a bit silly. It's actually the other gorilla end, and it's me. So so it's another way to create rhythm inside the shot.
I thought it was a reference to John Ford, because it's very famous that John Ford, in the States, in the Hollywood, the directors, they didn't get the final cut. Mm-hmm. The producer got the final cut. So they could re-edit your movie by changing the editing that you choose. But John Ford, as he was very precise, he knew since the writing process what exactly will be on the screen, even in arithmetical terms, how many long this shot. So when he found that the shot was good, just he put his hand on the camera, so the editor, the producer could not use, because there was this hand, his hand. So I thought this was a kind of John Ford monster in this movie.
It could have been. Really loved John Ford.
But what about you, Serge? In terms of the how do you think about the audience and in the effect on the audience that when you make your film, and is it something special when you think about funny scenes?
I don't know.
But have you been surprised about some parts, about special moments where you did not expect people laughing about?
The movie has not been released in France.
But you've seen it with other people.
Yeah, I've seen it in many festivals.
Okay.
But in festivals, this is a very strange audience. It is not the real audience. But
oh, come on!
I'm joking.
But are there moments where you think, why are they laughing now? They should not.
No, I didn't have this kind of experience. What I was afraid of, to be very frank, but I was not there during the screening, that I was anxious that the audience will laugh in the end. For me, the last, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the end is more tragic than comic. So I was afraid. I wanted nobody to laugh.
Didn't happen.
Especially in the scene where she falls down and she's trying to keep this pedagogical spirit. She's falling down on the floor and she's trying to go on again about this strange lesson about interaction. When do two causes interact instead of just acting separately? And for me, this is a sad scene. This is not at all a comical scene. So, for example, in Locarno or in New York, in Los Angeles, in many festivals, when I still watch my movie, I was a little anxious that people could laugh.
Ekkehard?
I mean, of course, in broad comedy, it's really a problem if people don't laugh. If it wants to be comedy. Marinale, for example, is a very different case, I think. And in her films, it's all about the mixtures, the not really knowing what to feel. And that's, I think, the effect she aims at. That's why she has all these many takes for every scene, and she does so much in the editing, trying to find the alchemy of the situation. But I mean, that's something different. She does not really want pure laughter, but she wants and a lot of directors, of course, want mixtures. And as it is something like alchemy, you really can't know what will happen when people react to it.
But even this mixture is something you want to produce.
But I was really surprised that you bring in the police as a level of, or as a instance, or.
She called them
Yeah.
in the hospital scene,
Yeah.
so they are there because she called them. She.
But you invented this story. It's not.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that
yeah.
Isabelle Huppert herself called the police.
This is true. She wants. She saw Malik in the hospital. She saw how bad he was. So she thought it was now too dangerous. I don't know. Too sad. Too tragic. So she wanted to denounce herself.
Yeah, it's guilt, because at one
it's
point she
guilt.
says she feels that something is wrong, and it comes out in that.
Yeah, but as the police in your movie is a source of humor and comedy.
Not in my movie, no.
No, in his movie. So, and we saw this both together. It becomes one whole oeuvre together. Then for me this evening, then I thought, no, the police can't interfere there.
They should have said you should shit on your own.
It will maybe a reference to his first film. Then that's to his previous film with the police. But that's another question. Something I think both of you aim to do. And I think comedy takes a part in this, is to make films that you both say transcend a little bit or like populaire in maybe in a sense of the French word. So something that transcends the usual categories of art film and not art film and things like and all these stamps that are being put on. Do you think that is still possible nowadays with such a fragmentation of audiences?
Well, I can only speak for me. In my case, I would like to reach out to an audience, but like the thing about my film is that it's really obvious that it's been made in with no budget at all. It's all shot in my apartment, and it's not. Somehow it like I don't want to talk about economical discrimination in film, but there's an artisanal feeling, and I know it's not like it's not an easy sell for some people that wants something else. So, but I would really like to. I've never experienced to work with a budget. I don't know how much, but where I can pay myself, I can say that. Mm-hmm. So, and I would be interested to see how it could work in a manner with more than like 10 days to shoot or whatever. So I would really enjoy it, because I would be out of my way to talk about it when I haven't experience on both. And I know Serge started in a really artisanal way for your first film, and then you went on to make.
I began to be very successful. I'm sorry to say it.
That's okay. It's that. But how do you aim to, like, or do you think it is still possible to reach this bigger audience? Do you think it's? And I think laughter is one indicator of what audience you can reach. Is it possible to bridge that gap?
The film proves it. What? The movie proves it.
All right. Okay.
I don't know. The movie will be released in France next month. Let's wait and see. I don't know. But this is true, without any joke, that in France, and perhaps the same in Germany and in other people, there is this huge gap between the art movies, the commercial movies. The commercial movies are a lot of comedies. The art movies are more like serious, sinister, documentary style, social deep issues, etc. Perhaps it's possible to put this gap away, and to try something where you don't have to add any cultural surplus value, to talk like Marx, but it's a little obscure.
How do you think in this context about like the new wave of French comedies? I mean, there's these all like Antoine Jacot, Les Tourneurs, and everything, which are however going to somehow have a niche audience in a way.
No, I don't know. What is a niche audience? What is not a niche audience? It's a very difficult thing to say. Everybody knows, I think, in this audience, and you know that, for example, Marguerite Duras movie, they didn't cost a lot. So in terms of how many dollars you need for produced and how many dollars you get by rehearsing the movie, by releasing the movie, there were hugely commercial movies. So it's not only in terms of how many people in the audience, it's a balance between production and distribution. So, for example, Romer is a perfect example, because in the beginning he had big failures, like his first movie, and then lately in his career, since the late 70s, he began to be successful, even if it was not the same in the end. So it's just to find a kind of equilibrium, like in economy, you know, Nash equilibrium. It doesn't mean that you get 2 million people watching the movie. It just means that you get some kind of good equilibrium between how many it costs and how many you get. So you cannot say only by the direct number of seats. You know what I mean? It's the equilibrium. Blah, 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 blah.
How do you see that? How do you see that in Germany, Eva? Do you think that there are still films that can touch and maybe also like popular films, comedies that can touch, like can transcend this kind of fragmented audience and public?
So I don't watch German comedy films a lot in cinema, at least. I watch more American comedy movies, and I think there are some funny.
And Quebec movies, Quebec comical movies. Those are the best.
Now, she's found the taste now.
So I'm in this. I'm very interested in these comedy movies that come from this Saturday Night Live school, or there's from these actors who come from this scene or so, and I think I'm very interested in these jokes, and I think they have this kind of they can do intelligent movies which are really funny in the same time.
Is there a reason why that is so little? There's so little of this in Germany. I mean, we have actors who could do it like yourself.
I think because German movies don't, also German series, they don't they have not the possibility to be created in this way, like in the United States, because there's a whole group of people, a much bigger group of people working together on jokes, and it's always good when it's not only one person thinking about the humor, but it's created by a whole group. So yeah.
Ekkehard, do you have a theory about that, about the audience and what reaches an audience, what can talk to a bigger audience, and
give us a theory?
No, I would agree with Eva. We don't have the stand-up comedians the States have.
And
quite simply,
we
Mario
don't have
Barth
it.
is really something quite else, and they're not these. I mean, Tony Erdmann really is an interesting case, because nobody would have thought it would be that successful, and it turned out to be a huge success in Germany. Not as much as Fuck You Goethe, which is a high school comedy in Germany, extremely successful and not very sophisticated. Quite good perhaps, but not very sophisticated. But Tony Erdmann really proves.
Yeah, but
the
Maren,
point.
for instance, she also we did a lot of research in American comedy for this movie, and you can see it also. So there might be farts involved, for instance. So I wanted to add something about this. I think it's very simple. I think that that the Third Reich really cut off the tradition of laughter in Germany, and we are nowadays we slowly come back to a real humor that also deals with dangerous things, and not only has to cover the tragedy, or the political tragedy of the past, because this was what. So comedy coming from the 50s was always to cover the black thing behind us we shouldn't talk about, and I think so slowly the German humor has emancipated from this. Yeah.
Other questions from the audience?
Hi. I'd like to question the very label of comedy. It's like, I've always felt it's a bit counterproductive to, it's almost like you're gonna tell a joke and say beforehand, you're gonna laugh because it's gonna be funny in a way. And I find myself laughing a lot more in films where I don't expect it to be funny to begin with. So do you actually would you label your film comedy, or what would be the ideal label for both your films, I think?
Well, in my case, I like to be playful with it because I know that so I always say that there are cop comedies, romantic cop comedies, but I know it's not really the case. But I'm just like trying to be playful with it because I'm not aiming at to work within the limits of a certain genre. At least I don't think about that. Like I said, it's not something that interests me as far as genre for when I write or stuff like that. As far as structure or whatever.
French movies that have any relations to fantastic movies are a very tiny minority in France. We could say that my movie belongs to an obscure tradition. Let's say Georges Franju and Jean-Claude Brissot. I mean, you take Suburbs, High School, fantastic. This is it.
Other questions or remarks? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much for your films. Thank you very much, all of you, for contributing to this discussion. Thank you for holding out so long, and come again on Tuesday when we show an equally somehow funny film called Searching for Oscar, about a film critic who doesn't watch films anymore. Thank you very much.